We are back on MorningLine, our final segment with Dahron Johnson with us, a transgender athlete, cyclist, a community activist. We're talking about the competitive playing field out there for transgender athletes as they compete. So it's interesting, FINA now has passed some regulations, and there are some where it's talking about, well, to avoid the advantages some transgender athletes may get from testosterone, to qualify, you have to start the hormone therapy at age 12 or under, so that you're not allowed to build the muscle or the growth that you would get with that over the years. And to me, I think that's, again, I've used the word a couple times, absurd, because what 12-year-old really knows at that point, and there may be some, of course, now it's time for me to start hormone therapy. If that's going to be the guidelines, you know, the transgender effort to compete on a level playing field's done. It's not going to happen. I mean, who does that at age 12? And what parents? Some parents will, but others won't at that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that you're really pointing out one of if not the key question mark in this whole recent FINA policy, which is why this line, why this line in the sand, especially given, as I mentioned earlier, the IOC's, the International Olympic Committee's statement to its member sports to try to create pathways.
By the way, FINA, and that's a French synonym, but it's the International Swimming Federation.
Exactly.
So we're talking about swimming here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this seems to be really directly contradictory to the type of participation that the International Olympic Committee was trying to encourage. And you're exactly right. The pathways forward for medical support of transgender youth is already narrow, right? And then you're saying that you have to recognize and start on that pathway and be to a certain sort of predetermined finish line, as it were, as far as that by age 12.
For instance, I mean, you would say that you've always identified as a female from birth, okay?
Right.
But at what age did you really say I can do something about this? Was it 12?
Heck no.
Okay.
It was far later in life than that. And I'd say that one of the reasons that it took so long to get to that place where I could say, this is who I am, is because the cultural pushback of me being able to state in a positive, affirming way, not just this is who I am not, but to be able to have the language and to have the, if I can pat myself in the back for 2 seconds, to have the strength and courageousness and sort of feeling enough that the ground was solid enough underneath my feet to be able to say, this is who I am. That every time that we have these types of restrictions, whether it's in sports, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in any place in our public conversations, any time that we put into effect these type of restrictions, we're creating more and more barriers for people to claim simply who they are in a positive fashion. And I don't care what type of relationship that one is in, whether it's a intimate relationship, whether it's a relationship of friends, whether it's a work colleague relationship. If you're not bringing a whole self to that relationship and to that space, there are going to be problems down the line, because a person who's not fully present isn't able to do all they're able to do, all they're capable of doing in this world. And if you're talking about friendships or intimate partnerships, for example, we all know this. That takes courage and trust and patience and time. And if one doesn't feel able to bring that whole self into any of those spaces, what future are we holding out for these folks? So again, to come back to the sporting point and to Megan Rapinoe's point, what we really need to be concerned about is what type of message and what type of affirmation, what type of solid ground we're creating under the feet of trans youth, non-binary, gender non-conforming youth. What type of foundation are we offering for them to help build full and complete selves so that we as a community, we as a society can benefit from the full power of the strengths and presence that they can bring forward into their lives, no matter how small or large those lives may be on a public scale. Yeah. And so the messages that we want to try to encourage, not just trans folks like me, but I think a lot of folks out there, is what type of message, what type of lessons, what type of affirmation can we give our youth and the people around us so that they can be the best selves that they can be?
Listen, what you're up against, and society in general, seems to be, it's a shifting of long-held beliefs over time. And so I'm just wondering what you think moving forward it's going to take. I think science can play a role in this to try to answer more questions so that you have a better understanding. But for so many people, and I guarantee a lot of the viewers out there, they still just can't get their heads around watching us this morning and recognizing that you are a transgender female. And they're saying, wait, and they're still confused.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And the more exposure you get, the more maybe you understand. But that's really what you're up against, one way or the other, is changing long-held beliefs. And even with a lot of the information out there, it's just going to take time. And frankly, there are going to be some people, especially in my opinion, those who are older, you know, if they've grown up and only recognize this one way, that will never accept it. They just won't be able to bring themselves to. Okay? Maybe they're not open-minded enough. Maybe they're just too set in their ways. And so what do you think the key is going to be for more acceptance?
Well, I would frame my professional life is as a chaplain in healthcare settings. And I bring this up because one of the things that I feel most, that I work towards regularly in those spaces and with folks as I have conversation with them and I sit with them in some of the most difficult points in their lives, is listening to their stories, valuing their experience, and taking them at their word about that. And in the process of hearing where they feel their strengths are and their challenges are, to offer back to them in ways the language and stories out of their own experience, and to then help them, if need be, to think about ways to get a different purchase, a different hold on that information, on that sense of the world that they already have. So I would say that for me in conversation, what I try to do here, what I try to do in my professional life, what I try to do in any space is to value what people themselves, and what I'm asking for myself from others, is for each of us to value the story and the person that each of us is, and to work with each of us as we are. And so if I was in conversation with somebody who was having difficulty about this, my first questions would be around, well, help me understand what men have been in your life. Help me understand what your understanding of being a woman is in this world, and then to work from that point to then try to create connections of experience. I don't want to force anything on anybody. I'm here. I mean, I'm not going to be changing, but at the same time, regardless of our different experiences in the world, I feel very strongly that there are ways in our differences that we can still find connection enough in the experiences that we've had to create a pathway forward for us together, and also individually in our own journeys of understanding.
Yeah, there has to be some kind of common ground, because what you said about what do you consider in your mind a woman, a man, and you have these preconceived notions, and a lot of them are based on your personal experience and are very, very legitimate. But all of a sudden, meet someone like you, and some of those perceptions change, and that's not bad. I'm personally, I'm open to new things and perceptions, but it takes a while for that to really register. It just does.
Yeah, and the ways that we have been given, and the ways that we are taught from before we're even thinking about thinking, right? About the differences in gender. Make those differences feel altogether natural, as if there is no learned component of them. I would say that, for example, you were referencing scientific studies on sports performance. I would say that studies are always going to be a little ambiguous in their results. You're going to have one study that says this, another that says that.
Several.
On sports performance, particularly because it's not just physical ability that creates our ability to get across the finish line first or to score that clutch goal at the buzzer. It also has to do with our experience within that particular sports arena, our ability to read the situation and take risks, and all of those things also have taught gendered components as well. The difference in what we encourage in risk-taking behavior, for example, between boys and girls generally, that is then also going to have a difference on our sport fields, right? But that's not as easy to kind of just pigeonhole in the natural things that are just the way the world are, it's just the way people are. We actually have some responsibility in what we teach our children and what they're able to accomplish. So I think that it takes a variety of approaches and, again, a variety of ways of figuring out how to best meet the people that we are to both continue the conversation and then also show in these sporting situations that it's not the drastic picture that it's always painted to be.
Right. Again, just to remind folks too, it's a very, very small percentage, but the message sent, depending on how you handle it, is huge.
Exactly.
It affects a lot of people, and we don't need to sugarcoat the fact that there's a high rate of suicide among transgender young people. And unfortunately, there's a high rate of suicide among a lot of young people, but especially among transgender and the like.
Well, this is such an important point, right? Because we just had a bill that was passed, and then Governor Lee, I believe, deferred signature on it, but that meant it still passed into law. Felony. I'm losing my language here, but that if you are in camping on public lands throughout the state, that becomes a felony conviction.
Sure, that would be.
That may not seem like a trans issue, but when you see how many folks in the homeless population are transgender, then you realize that the messages that we're sending are creating downstream effects in other areas where we're criminalizing transness, criminalizing difference in any number of ways that don't even have to do with gender.
We'll have to talk some more because, boy, we just scratched the surface. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, Nick. I really appreciate it.
We will talk again. Take a break, be back with a programming note right after this.